is a joint session with this, I think, supply chain and marketing and the
Two great powers have joined forces.
Consulting, yes. So how many are you are already consulting club member? Those are you who are not try to be. Okay. There is
Thank you, Raj.
There's a registration sheet. I appreciate if all of you put your names in there.
Unless you don't want to be in the club. If we scare you away, that's totally cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so tonight we're going to do things a little bit different from the last couple. So, once again, like I started the rest. Ooh, Ashley. So, I'd like to keep things informal, so feel free to ask questions, say anything, interrupt me, whatever, all throughout this. We're going to start by going over some general supply chain concepts and terminology. For all the second years in the room, I'm sorry, you've probably seen this before, might not find it as exciting, but hopefully the later parts will make up for that.
It's fine.
It's fine. You're the expert here, Art. You're on the
I
panel.
don't anything in supply chain.
Yeah, what? No, I'm not going to say that. You know what I'm thinking. Okay, then we're going to go through some questions and practice applying some of those concepts. These are really the concepts that I picked that I saw in interviews that I did last year. So there might be some other ones, like hopefully some of you went through that deck that we sent out, the supply chain basics. So that covers a lot of stuff, but a lot of it you didn't really see in an interviewed environment. So these are the main things that I remember seeing last year that hopefully you guys can study up on and be ready for if you see them in the next few weeks. And then we're going to have a fun time. We're going to have the panel. So we're going to have a couple people down here, and you can ask them questions about their interview experiences, and we'll throw them some sample questions as well and see how they handle it. So to kick it off, hopefully you guys remember reorder points. So two main systems are P systems and Q systems. So periodic systems, you order at certain periods, so maybe you do it every month or so. Quantity systems, you do it once you get to a specific level. Is that pretty obvious? Is this news to anybody, or you guys are familiar with this stuff?
Don't be shy.
Thanks, Sarah says it's no. This is new. Okay. Okay. Yeah, this was all Q2, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, maybe you've seen it in real life somewhere. I don't know. Maybe not. Apparently not. Manu doesn't know it, so I'll assume nobody does, because he's generally the most knowledgeable out of everybody ever. He's also the best soccer player. Interesting fact of him. He's got great maneuvers. I can't take credit for that line. That's Rob Bayless. Okay, so those are the main two systems you'll see for deciding when to reorder inventory. Safety stock is a concept of how much stock you want to have on hand just to cover up the risk of stockouts. So maybe there will be more demand than you were expecting in a period. How much safety stock you want to hold will be a function of the standard deviation of demand and how variable it is. Lead times are the amount of time between placing an order and receiving it. So that can be for any supplier you're buying stuff from. So a relevant example would be like if you buy something from Amazon, the lead time is what, like 2-day shipping usually. So
We are doing the same day now.
yeah, okay, same day now. So they're cutting down the lead times at Amazon. So thank you for doing that, Harsh. We appreciate it. So any questions on that? That makes sense? Good. I want to blow through this stuff. Okay, so sample question you might see relating up. Yes?
Do we have the definitions for those inventory types in the supply chain basic?
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
This is just stuff I remember that I think would be relevant to have in discussions and interviews. So, I mean, that could come up at some point if they were talking about inventory levels. You might want to ask what system they're using for reordering or how they're making those decisions. So that's why I included it there. I'm not sure what's in that deck. There's a ton of stuff. I didn't go through it in detail.
Do we have them, Brad?
What's the question?
The inventory types or the formulas, those stuff in the supply chain basics that the file?
Are you talking about Professor DeVilla's Supply Chain 101? Or
The file
Yeah,
that's
that's
sent
the
us.
deck. Yeah, that's the deck that was sent out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if it's in there or not.
But you'll never have to calculate it in an interview. Don't worry about that. This is just to get you familiar with the concepts. You won't need to calculate it out.
Okay.
So, sample question. We're a manufacturer located in the U.S. One of our suppliers is also in the U.S. Our one supplier is also in the U.S. and they consistently ship to us within 2 weeks. We're considering switching to a Chinese supplier, which would have lead times extended to 8 weeks rather than 2. What are some considerations we should have in regard to this based on the concepts What do you guys think?
More safety stuff.
Okay, who said more safety stuff? Why?
Because the lead time can be issues. It can be more than 8 weeks as well.
Yeah.
And we need to have some more safety stock in hand because it will take more time to have that material function sign up.
Okay. Anybody else?
How frequently you need to reorder?
Okay.
If you're reordering every fortnight or monthly, there might be some problems. But then if you do it once in a year, then you can. Then it won't be that big of a.
Okay. Myrtle?
The order quantities as well.
Very good question.
So it doesn't really relate to what you said. So,
Yeah.
so going to a Chinese supplier, maybe the model quantities will be substantially higher.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. It doesn't have to relate exactly, but yeah, because think about it. If it's coming on a boat, you might be shipping a whole bunch more in a container or something like that, and that's a good thing to bring up in interview. Yeah.
But there's a point if you have a higher order quantity, then you have a higher inventory holding cost once you get them all.
Yeah, it's a very good point as well. And that's something we're going to come back to pretty soon.
You also have to take into consideration if they're just in time.
Yeah, and that's also plays into carrying costs as well too. KT?
Procedures for bad quality to the supplier. So
Yeah.
take like one month to send it back.
That's a really good point too. Those Chinese suppliers. You never know. Not to say they're worse or better, but they're worse. Okay. Is that right?
Maybe look into a foreign currency exchange.
Yeah, that's another good thing to consider as well. Finish.
And I think the price itself plays a role because if they offer a very low price, they may cover the whole difference here, holding cost, everything.
Okay. So I think that's some good considerations.
So your safety stock is a function of lead time and one more thing, right?
Sorry, it's a function.
Standard deviation of demand during the
Yeah, the change, the variability.
So
Yeah.
the stock will depend on this and the lead time changes, right?
Yeah.
It's a direct function.
It would also depend on the type of order system. That'd be one other point. Because if you think about it, like if you do it in a P system, it wouldn't change like how often you order necessarily. It would likely just change the order point. So, but a P, because it's a period, it's just a matter of like raising the point, right?
I think it's the quantity which will change.
Yeah,
How
the
much-
queue would change a ton because you'd have to cover up those extra weeks of time. So they'd go up at least like 4 or 5 times. So, okay. Everybody have a general understanding of what I said?
But you just order more time, right? If your lead time is 8 weeks, say two, just order 4 times.
You could do that as well, but you might have issues then in having different batch sizes and things like that too. So. But yeah, more questions that come up that you want to ask. So this is a very general example. So good points, everybody.
Actually, it's a trade-off between the holding cost and the
Yeah, good job, team. Okay, so the next one I wanted to talk about was utilization rates. So that's simply how something is used. So it's a trade-off between, obviously, if you have high utilization for a system, you could have longer wait times in advance of that. So it's not necessarily a good thing. You just need to determine what you're looking for. So the example here I had was, imagine our client is a call center and their employees' utilization is 60%. So what could you derive from that knowledge? What does that mean?
They get calls only 60% of the time.
Maybe, yeah, maybe they're just waiting the rest of the time and nothing else is going on. Anybody else? Any other thoughts on that?
Just too many employees.
It could be too many employees.
Counting number of employees.
Why do you think that is?
To increase total utilization.
Okay, the one risk with that though, that's assuming uniformity of people calling.
Flow, yeah.
So like call centers, they get different calls at different times. It could be completely different. So you can't really say that based on this information. But, yeah.
They put a long time on answering each call that comes in
What makes you say that?
because the output is 60%. Isn't it the utilization rate, the percentage of output to input? Or some
I
calls?
think it's the time they're busy.
Yeah, it's the time they're on the phone. It's just how often they're being utilized.
Okay.
So that wouldn't really play into it.
Okay.
But the point I'm trying to make is it really doesn't tell you a lot. You need to look into more about the company's operations to figure out what it's actually related to. So it really like opens the door of a bag of questions and anything you can actually derive from that. So based on something like that, you'd want to know, okay, well, what's the actual deviation in the number of calls? How is call volume changed throughout the day? Like maybe they want to be like a top company that's always ready on the phone, so they want a really low utilization rate so that people aren't ever waiting. So, or maybe they just want to be like a terrible telephone service provider who's going to keep you on for an hour so that hopefully you'll hang up so they won't answer your call, in which case you want utilization at 100. So, that somewhat makes sense?
Yeah, Obama.
Okay, sure. Well, I don't know, I've never called them. But yeah, I've called home in Canada and it takes at least an hour. So. Okay. So any questions on that, or is that concept?
Jim, with each of these topics too, could you kind of give everybody an idea of like what part of supply chain is? So like the last one would be procurement, for instance, and this one would be like more operations. Just so you guys can kind of get a feel of, as you guys are applying for different roles, what's in your interests and things like that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So this would be very operations, or you'd see this in like a manufacturing environment potentially. Sorry, was there a question back there?
So for these kind of questions, do you want to treat it like a kind of case question and do it from there?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is, something like this is just like set up for you to probe. So there's a lot of things you don't know. So this is something where you want to ask questions just to get more information. So this is good, moving through this quick. Okay, one other thing I really wanted to talk about was distribution network design. Has anybody really dealt with these and like these graphs and show different ways that you can map stuff together? Okay, Myrtle has, that's good to see. So one of the things I did this past summer was work on a network redesign project. So how this effectively works is saying, okay, all the supplies are getting sent to the manufacturer, at which point they're being built, then they're being sent to different distribution centers. And these distribution centers are like throughout a country or throughout a region. And then from there, they're being distributed to the retailers. So if you think of that like a hub and spoke model, does that kind of make sense in your mind so you can picture how this works? So how you can shift these things around is depending on how many levels you want to have. So maybe so imagine this manufacturer is in China and they're sending to like 30 different distribution centers. So in that type of environment, each distribution center has to have a lot of inventory on hand because they're each serving their little market and everything's coming directly from China. However, if you were to shift that around and just have a big DC in the middle that everything like mixes through first and then gets distributed out to distribution centers, you can actually lower your average inventory a lot because instead of having to hold a lot on hand in each one of these little DCs, you can just hold a lot in the one mixing center and then distribute accordingly. So that was one of the projects I was looking at over the summer, and it's just good to kind of start thinking in these terms and how are these people actually holding inventory? How do these distribution networks actually work? So I just said a lot there, but I don't know if it all made sense. So did that make sense?
I have a question for you,
Yeah.
for the benefit of everyone.
Please.
So let's say you're starting a distribution center. What are the factors you think you'll consider?
Answer your own question. What do you think? You worked at Amazon. You know this stuff.
Yeah, you should start. I can probably pitch it.
Okay, well, location, obviously, yeah. And you're going to be thinking about the risks, like where are your products coming from, like what are the lead times for that going to be, any political risks, things like that, where products are coming from, where you're going to be shipping the products to, potential risks associated with the inputs, anything like that too.
Yeah, so this question kind of came up a couple of times in a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
So normally I would start from the goal of their distribution center. Normally a company might have a very specific need for that distribution center. Let's say they're trying to speed up the process of delivery. So that location will be strategic from that perspective or from a cost perspective. So once you know why they are opening a new one, it kind of helps to decide, okay, these are the locations which are feasible to kind of address that goal. Does it make sense?
It's a way better answer than I gave right there. Yeah.
So that was something which came up regularly on the interviews.
Okay.
I think Mark's brought up a really good point there that's applicable to a lot of interview questions. And that is always keep in mind what the goal is of the question and what it is you're trying to convey, what your ultimate goal is in your answer. It's really easy, especially if you get kind of off path or flustered, to lose focus and you start bringing in all this detail that's just not necessary. If you kind of just always have that goal very clearly and burn into your brain for that question, it's going to make your answer a lot simple and a lot more concise to what they're looking for, no matter what the question is.
All right, so good points all around. So I was curious, in terms of the interviews you guys have had so far for some of the first years, have you seen any questions relating to network design or distribution centers? Okay. You might. Any other questions on this before I keep going? Yeah.
I mean, with a question like, how would you assess a supplier if you're going to do new, business with a new supplier? Is that something that kind of fall into this kind of?
Not really, but maybe. So that would be more like supplier relationship management or like things you want to analyze.
So you wouldn't want to bring in the whole, depending on your distribution?
Yeah, you could totally bring it in though. You could still say, depending on how your network's designed, you're going to be evaluating suppliers based on these metrics. So that's a good point. You could definitely bring that into that conversation. Okay. So this is one I remember seeing in consulting interviews. It was calculating out inventory turns. So hopefully this is a familiar concept for second-year students anyways. So inventory turns are the number of times the inventory cycles throughout a period. So and it's based on average inventory for the period, not the ending inventory, which is a common mistake a lot of people make. So just give you guys a second to digest that. So based on my little example I've got here, cost of goods sold for the previous year was 2.4 million. Current inventory is 500,000, and the inventory at the beginning of the period was 300,000. So based on those numbers, what are the inventory turns in the past year?
4 to 5.
Okay, you can actually calculate it out. You don't have to just guess. Those of you who said 6, well done. For those of you who did not, yeah. Hello. Okay, so calculating that is going to be, things like that are fairly straightforward things you should know how to do going into interviews. I remember seeing that a couple times last year. So learn that, I guess.
So what's the answer?
6.
No, I know. How do you calculate it?
Oh, sorry. So you take 2.4 million, and you divide it by the average inventory level. So average in the year is the average between 500,000 and 300,000. That's 400,000. So just 24 divided by 4.
How is it? 400,000?
Is average for the period, yeah.
Oh, the average, sorry.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, that concept makes sense to everybody before I move on? Perfect. Okay, to build on that one, another important one that you'll want to understand what it means is days of inventory on hand. So that's just the days in the period you're calculating divided by the turns for the period you're calculating. So based on the numbers we had before, how many days on hand did we carry on average? Everybody's sort of doing like head math, figuring it out a bit. Okay. I'm going to give it to Kevin with 61. Well done. So that calculation, just 365 divided by 6. So that's how many times the inventory turns over in a period. Do you guys need an example to understand how that would work in an environment, or does it kind of make sense?
Yes.
Yes, which I guess it makes
Example.
sense. Yes, an example. Okay, so before coming back to school, I used to work for a tire distributor company. So I used to end up doing a lot of analysis on inventory turns. So we'd be looking at how long our products were being stayed in the warehouse before being sent out to a store. So we were always trying to focus on, okay, how can we like get these turns up, because we need to be holding inventory for less time and start moving it more. So that's effectively what we'd be calculating out. Like it would be a big deal if we could get it to go from like 5 up to 6, because we can just turn it that extra time per year is hugely valuable. And the next slide will describe why that's valuable. So did that make sense? Reasonable example? Okay.
Yes. Announcement.
Yeah, that was it. It's just like the sound going up in my head. It makes sense now. Yeah.
Senior program.
Okay.
Senior program.
So the next thing I want to talk about was, hopefully you guys are familiar with just-in-time. So obviously getting the right items, the right quantities of them, at the right time, the right place. So the importance of that is that you can really reduce the amount of inventory you have on hand at any time. And another important calculation that you'll want to know that makes sense is carrying cost, and that's just your inventory dollar value times your cost of capital. Does everybody know what cost of capital means? Yes, kind of, sort of. So that's the cost it costs a business to actually have money. So that might be from debt financing or from equity financing, but there's a weighted average cost of capital formula for the finance people that you could use to figure it out. But effectively, it's just at what rate the business is borrowing money to be able to do things like own inventory. So an example here I've got is if you had a cost of capital of 15%, so I'll read it even. Our client has a cost of capital of 15%. Historically, they've had approximately 50 million in on-hand inventory at all times. They can make investments in just-in-time technology that will reduce average inventory on hand by 20%. Based on those numbers, how much will they save per year? So before shouting out, I'd recommend actually trying to think it through, because that'll actually cement the concept in your mind. Okay, does anybody think they have an answer?
2.5 maybe?
Pardon?
2.5?
No. 11.5?
No. I got 1.5.
1.5? Sorry, who was that? Well done. Gold star, 1.5. Okay, so to figure out this actual number, you start with how much inventory you're going to be reducing. So right now, average inventory is about 50 million. If you're going to be reducing it by, I got 20%, that's reducing $10 million, right? So everybody sees inventory is going to drop by $10 million on average throughout the year. So what that actually means is they're not actually saving that money. They're saving the cost of having that money. So the cost of capital, you then apply to that 10 million. So you do 15% times 10 million, you have 1.5 million. That's your actual dollar savings if you're implementing that kind of technology.
So the 10 million is not actual savings?
Yeah, so it's not actual profit or anything. That's just money you wouldn't have to invest to run your business. So yeah, so the 10 million is exactly, you apply a cost of capital to figure out how much it costs to have that 10 million just on hand. Any questions on that? Hopefully a relevant example and it makes some sense. Okay. So, to take it one step further, let's say it'll cost $5 million to implement it. What's the payback? 3 point something. Good answer. Okay. So these are the kind of things you should be able to do without a calculator. You should be able to, all these calculations, you should be able to get close estimates in an interview environment, just pen and paper. So something like that, obviously it's 5 million divided by 1.5, which is a savings. So you get 3 1/3 years is how long it'll take for a payback period. So, do you guys feel confident you could do that if you were faced in an interview environment and somebody was looking at you and giving you this serious stare down? Okay. So,
We can get these slides, right?
yeah, I'll send them out or we'll post them online in the
Just to let it go away for a while and come back and
Yeah.
see if I can do it.
Well, that's my point. Yeah, I just want to put these up here so you get an idea and hopefully, yeah, exactly. Go back and refresh the
It
videos.
makes sense when you're up there blowing our mind.
Yeah, and I even put notes in there explaining how I calculated it. So,
Perfect.
so hopefully it'll be doable. Yeah, you need more help, but you nailed it.
No. I was just going to say that the last couple of presentations was on the OrgSync website or whatever, so I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay, good to hear at least some people went to check those out. So thank you. Okay, so one other thing I wanted to talk about, because I like finance, and you might see financial statements in a lot of these supply chain interviews. or just operational data in general. It might not be specifically like balance sheets and income statements or anything. But what's important to remember with any of the statements you're going to see is the numbers are really just made up. So you're not meant to infer a lot based on the period. What you're meant to infer is looking at the time series and looking how the numbers change over time, because that's where they're going to give you the information. So you want to look at things like, okay, are costs growing faster or slower than revenue? And then based on that, that's where you'd want to drill down and try to get more information. So like, why might that be? Why might costs be growing faster? And then you'd actually want to drill in and figure out what are the cost inputs or the factors that are actually causing that. Or same thing with inventories. That's something very likely in a supply chain type interview. If you're given a data set, it's very likely that one of these will be off balance, and that's something you want to look at. And I remember seeing that specifically last year. So, and yeah, obviously it'll likely be cost-based because it's a supply chain interview. Because I guess hopefully most of you are supply chain people. If not, sorry for all of this. But, so you want to look at like maybe ways that you can lock in some of those costs over time, or find ways to reduce them. A couple things I had here that I remember bringing up would be either hedging your costs or some kind of vertical integration play, so you can control the channels that are causing those inputs to rise. So, any questions on that stuff? So hedging would just be like buying a contract at a specific price, so like how Southwest makes money. So, any other questions? Or?
How can it be? How can it become into an interview question? Hedging.
Oh, you could. Well, what I did was how can you lock in costs for a certain material that's very variable? So you can hedge it by buying forward like contracts on it and buying in advance. So it reduces the risk of variability of the prices changing over time.
So it's not like they bring in with figures into.
No, it's not like they're going to bring you like derivative models or anything.
Alright.
It's just like an idea. How can you reduce the variability so you can plan out your cost structure better and try to picture how the business is going to change over time and how it can adapt. So a hedge would be an idea you could bring up.
You can use financial instruments as well, right? You can use an option or a swap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
put a swap on top of an option to come into a swap.
Yeah, you can do a swap option. Yeah. I'm surprised anybody in the room knows swap options. So well done. Yeah, it is a real term, believe it or not. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, that was all the important stuff, terminology I wanted to cover here. So I really want to move forward into the panel here now. So hopefully you guys have some questions that you want to ask the second years. And, do you guys want to come down? Or?
Yeah,
come on down. Get in the hot seat. Well, I just wanted to bring in some. So, yes, please do.
Harsh.
Okay.
You guys introduce yourselves and say what you guys did last summer?
Hi everyone.
Okay, you guys too busy talking about Amazon or what?
Yeah. Mine was in.
Okay,
Pardon?
He got in.
Nicely done. Thank you. Did I call that or what? There we go.
Nice.
Okay.
My name is Harsh, second year student. I interned in Amazon. Got a call, got a full-time offer from Amazon, accepted it. So happy to answer any questions which I can try to answer any questions.
My name is Seth, also a second year studying supply chain, and I interned at AT Kearney in Chicago this past summer.
I'm JJ Fairbanks. I interned at Deloitte in San Francisco, and I did get an offer and will be returning.
So if you have any questions, we can try to answer. You can have our take on any question which you feel kind of uncomfortable to answer.
Why Amazon?
I think Amazon is already done, right?
Yeah.
Do you really want me to answer that question?
No.
No.
So Matt?
Okay, so first years might get more of this and a little less more experience. When you get asked a question that you literally don't know even what to say or where to go, what the hell are we supposed to do? Just flat out admit, I do not know. And I'm sorry. I just want to know because I felt that way a few times already.
What, like what did they ask you that left you feeling so?
Tell me about. Can I say the whole question? I'm not gonna get like Amazon non-disclosure.
No, that's fine.
You don't need to name the company. Just a question.
Amazon. It wasn't Intel either. Okay, so.
Can you give us like a word it rhymed with?
Right. So.
Yeah, Amazon, yeah.
It's the follow-up questions related to this question and how they dig deeper. Like, I just don't know how much further I can take this question. Like, what would you do to improve the U.S. Postal Service experience for your delivery man? Oh. And then you answer it as best you can, right? And then they dig deeper. And then you answer that a bit better, and you dig deeper. Where do you finally, or I don't know. I'm not trying to just be like funny. I really want to know, like, what do you do in those situations where you don't totally go to self-destruct mode and then screw over the rest of your interview?
I think what I would do in that particular case, after taking it to as many levels as I could with whatever ideas you come up with on the spot, I would say, you know what, at this point, without having more experience in this specific arena, I've probably exercised every idea that I have initially. So at this point, I would probably turn to my team and turn to internal resources within the company to kind of brainstorm what ideas they have. Because me as an individual, I'm out of ideas. And you can be a little bit humble about it, and you can be a little self-deprecating and admit that you might be out of ideas on the spot. But also, what are you going to do? You're out of ideas, so what are you going to do about it? You need to talk about what your plan is. In this case, go to other resources within the company, whatever it may be. That's what I came up with right there, but whatever it may be. You can do something if you're out of ideas in real life. I mean, you've probably been in a real life situation where they asked you to figure something out, you didn't know what to do. So what did you do? You researched it, you talked to people. So talk about that if you hit that wall.
I think sometimes it's good to push it back on the client and ask, what have you done? And why did you pursue that? It's a way to point me in the right direction of what you're going for. Because sometimes they'll ask you to just come up with an answer out of nowhere, and really they already have a good idea of where they want to be taking that question. So ask them, where are you going with it? And then that will hopefully kind of help spark that train of thought.
Yeah, I think that will help. Like asking a question like, is there something specific you're looking from this question?
Yeah, like time, value.
Is there something specific I'm missing? Do you want me to talk about something which you think I'm kind of missing? I think when you're in the middle of that interview and you have a good discussion going on, they kind of help you sometimes, give you a little bit of hint of, okay, can you talk a little bit about this maybe? And then I think you can move on from there.
And I think Steph had a good point earlier when he said, like, what's the overarching goal? So, like, that question for Schmamazon, their overarching goal is, one of their tenets is customer obsession. And so that postman is the customer-facing Amazon employee. So they're probably driving in something with that. So if you don't know like the full answer, like bring it back to like their core values that you're trying to show as an interviewee that you possess to like be a part of their company.
My question is more probably for maybe the second years and I'm in the MBA program as well. Is it easier or harder to apply as an experienced professional or as a student for some of those consulting positions? Because it seems like they kind of want to, Deloitte steers you to apply through the university, whereas, I don't know, McKinsey or whoever else, if they're not coming to this university specifically, how are we to go about doing that, applying?
So I think that what's easier is to go through on campus if you ever have that option, which obviously you don't for every company, but if you have that option, you should absolutely pursue it, because if they're targeting ASU students, there's already something about you that they like. The fact that you go to a school that they like. So you already have a leg up in that sense. If you are going towards a company that doesn't come to campus, I know it sounds cliche, but it's all about building your network and reaching out to the connections you do have, people either you know at that company or people you know who knows someone at that company, and trying to build as much of a personal relationship with that company as you can. It might be as simple as, you know, having a phone call just to kind of pick their brain on things. But the beautiful thing about being an MBA student is people see us as totally harmless. Like if you're currently working full time, you say, hey, I'm looking to change careers and work for your company, they're not going to give you the time of day. But if you say, hey, I'm an MBA student, I'd love to learn more, people will love to share their experiences with you. So use that to your advantage and reach out. I send people messages like point blank on LinkedIn all the time that I've never met before, kind of just tell them who I am and why I'm reaching out. And I've had pretty decent success doing
Okay,
that.
so that's not weird.
No.
Well, I mean, don't be like, I scoped out your profile, I know everything about you, and let's get together. That might be weird, but if you're professional about it, I've done it and I've had some pretty good luck.
But generally, I have asked actually from those that went through experience channel, the way that treat you is quite different. Most of them, you don't have to pass the case interview for some of them, you see? Because from MBA students, when they're going, as a student, when you apply, they ask you for case interviews. But recently, one of my friends, he just graduated recently from MBA program, and he arranged an interview for Deloitte in San Francisco, and the process was quite different. No case interview or anything, and during the first round, he hasn't get any response yet. And the first round, it was how you relate your experience to consulting. Much more deeper questions that relate. I think generally case interviews are much easier than when you have to relate your experience to the consulting. This is my understanding.
Questions?
Typically, how many rounds of interviews are there in consulting companies when they come for recruitment? And how do they actually structure their interview questions, like from one round till the end, if you actually progress that far?
Yeah. So for Deloitte, if you send in your application, you get an interview, and it's broken up into two pieces. So they're both kind of micro 20-minute interviews, 50-minute interviews, where one of them is the behavioral, tell me about a time when X, Y, or Z. The other part is a mini case, where we actually are turning out numbers like we just talked about. If you pass both of those, then you go to a more extended, full-blown 45-minute case interview with a partner or a manager, or senior manager, that sort. So you have two small ones in one interview time and a second one. Other companies I know do group interviews. I talked to an intern that I worked with. He applied at McKinsey, and he said he did a group interview only. So it kind of depends.
AT Kearney's a little bit different. So my first round was on campus, 30 or 45 minutes, kind of split between behavioral-based questions and not even a mini case question, but a problem-solving type question. Like how many used cars were sold in the United States last year? If you're invited to go to the next round for AT Kearney, it's in Chicago, at which point we had 3 interviews back to back to back, all 30 or 45 minutes. And they followed the same exact structure, behavior-based followed by these problem-solving. And then at the end of that day, for AT Kearney, you do the case presentation, which is a little bit different than the way Deloitte does it. This, you're in a room by yourself, you have time to prepare an actual presentation that you then give to a lot of the managers that you'd interviewed with earlier in the day. So between the two processes and between like the option for maybe group interviews, there's going to be variation. It's going to depend on the firm, but it'll obviously have some combination of behavior and either mini cases or problem solving that get progressively more involved as you get further into the process.
And you'll just have to talk to the recruiting people about what is the process that's not offensive or anything, to be like, hey, how does this work?
Right.
So just ask.
I have a question because I thought you guys were here to answer all of my interview questions for me.
Yeah.
So,
Harsh is here for that. So.
I want to hear from all of you. I want to know what metrics you use for improvement.
Which process are you talking about?
I don't know. That's an Intel interview question.
So that's a great question. If I have to answer that question, I'll probably ask another question. Like, I think metrics for different processes should be relevant to the process. So do you have any process in mind? Then I can figure out the right focus matrix.
Maybe, no, not matrix, metrics. Like, what are your own personal metrics? Like, what do you grade yourself on to see that you're improving, and what are you doing to do your job better?
Okay. Seth, you want to take that?
Oh, wow, that's good. So did they actually ask you about self-evaluation?
I know.
Those jerks.
They're
All right.
online.
So what I would do, so you did something right, you tell us. So what I would do, my first response would be, to Harsh's point, would be a question. Well, what is it that you're actually trying to evaluate? And if they say anything, I would pick an example. I would say, well, I used to be a production supervisor, and one of the key metrics was the labor efficiency of our employees. So we would measure the dollar value that we paid them for the hours that they worked, and weighed against the dollar value of the product that we shipped. And obviously, the goal was to get that as close to 100% as we possibly could. And that was, for us, was a really good measure of employee performance and how efficiently we were running our production shop floor.
So she's asking more about self-evaluation.
She just added that. Yeah.
Okay.
So if they don't give you something and you ask and they still don't give you something specific, use whatever works, whatever's most convenient. In my case, I used a specific example that I had actually used before, so it was very easy to speak to.
Was it specifically self-evaluation?
No, just like what metrics do you use for improvement? It's one of the last door supply chain interview questions for Intel.
I think the self-evaluation was tough. I would probably answer with talking about measuring how long I was in certain positions and the time I was there before promotion opportunities came about, and then my rate in reaching promotions and actually being rewarded promotions. It's more of a longer term metric, but if you're measuring your career development, that's what I would speak to.
Depends what you're trying to improve.
Yeah.
I have a question. So suppose you open an organization. What are the key supply chain metrics that you'll use to measure the performance of your organization as a whole?
Awesome question. Go for it, guys.
I can No, like I can again take an example. Let's say, what is your first goal as an organization?
Yeah.
Let's say you're an e-commerce company, you're starting. I think you will find out what is it that will provide you with success in that company. So you decided, okay, let's say the speed at which you provide services to the customer, that is going to help you to grow your company. So definitely my metric has to be focused on that. Let's say you decided, okay, the cost of my supply chain is really important. Let's say cost of goods sold or overall number of employees or productivity. That will help you to realize your goal or your, the different things you have set out to do. Then my matrix will be surrounded by different strategy goals I have kind of aligned for my company. Like I think this is really important because you cannot have like 500 different KPIs, key performance indicators. Otherwise, you'll be in a complete mess. So you want to focus certain KPIs which can give you a direct picture of how my company is doing. Like let's say number of packages which were delayed more than the promised date. So that gives you a metric like, okay, this is something which is going, there is a red flag. So I'll probably start from there. You want to add to that?
Perfect. I think that's a really good example, and it was a really good example too of showing that anytime when you're faced with these type of interview questions, if you can tie it back with something in your professional experience, like Harsh, you may have worked in an e-commerce site, is this right? Like,
it was not e-commerce, but
you know what I mean. Like exactly, if you can tie that back to something you've done, even if it's not exactly it, that's huge value. So,
like in general, I have felt that at least for companies, I have interviewed with a couple of companies, but companies really want to kind of, to be really honest, they want to see how you think and how you think about the problem, plan your approach, and then go to the solution. I think a lot of times when we make a mistake is that we directly go to the solution. We directly say that, okay, you should do that. Instead of just kind of thinking about the problem, breaking it down a little bit, and then thinking, oh, these are the 3 key things you're trying to answer. I think these are my alternative solutions, or this is what kind of can lead me to a solution. But sometimes we kind of directly jump into the solution. Working with Amazon, I realized like that is not a good thing to do. You really have to plan, do it, and then kind of go to the solution.
It's like also segregating it into different like supply chain sections, like suppose like for Amazon, if you have a supplier base, then you have operations, then you have logistics. Then within logistics, what improvement you can do, what are the matrix, in operations, what are the matrix that you use, and for procurement, what are the matrix you use, and then kind of connect them, which you can, measure to calculate your mean target code, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, even in case interviews, I think they really want to think like how you think about the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the approach that we've been preaching over the last couple of weeks for case interviews about deconstructing problems and making logical assumptions to reach a solution, the same logic still holds true for any type of question. They want to know what's going on in your mind and how are you formulating a response and a solution to whatever the question may be. Which is why I know in the context of this room it's been kind of funny, like you guys ask us a question and the first thing we always do is ask you a question back. But that's actually what I do in interviews. I almost always ask for more information or ask what the context is in which I'm answering. And sometimes they give it to you and sometimes they don't. And it's also almost more advantageous if they don't give it to you, because then, to Jeff's point, you can use an example from your life and it's just so much easier to speak to.
Like sometimes when you're breaking down a problem, you can even ask like, do you think 10% is a good assumption?
For sure.
And they kind of tell you that, yeah, I think it's a fair assumption, go ahead. So that way you kind of engage the guy who's interviewing you, and that probably works better rather than not keeping him engaged.
Great question. Actually, it sounds a lot like what we were talking about like last week, like almost word for word.
Sorry?
Yes. Exactly, yeah.
I was good.
No, you nailed it, yeah. It sounds like you were. Like,
Sometimes you might, in an interview they can ask you a question like, what are you as a consultant and what are you not as a consultant? Like what are you going to do as, taking up this profession as full time? So when you ask these, when they ask you like these kind of questions, like some really general questions, but like which cannot be like articulated really clearly, what are you going to say?
I can ask for clarification.
Yeah.
I'm still confused.
Yeah. Well, like, is the question you're struggling with, what are you as a consultant and what are you not as a consultant?
Yeah,
How do you respond to
basically
that?
they want to see if we understand the meaning of what actually means to be a consultant.
So if I was faced with that specific question, I would probably speak to how, as a consultant, what I am is a collaborative problem solver. I'm not there to tell my clients what to do or how to run their operation. I'm there to work with the client to identify what specifically it is that's giving them problems or giving them trouble, just to really reach down to the root cause of their pain points, and then working with them to co-identify solutions that are going to help address those pain points. What I am not is a person who's there, to go do some data analysis without any type of collaboration or communication, without any type of client interface, and then tell them what needs to be done.
Okay.
That's about what I would answer.
I think it's one of the things that, in discussion with other people I talked to this summer, the fun part about being a consultant is that you get to be in a kind of an objective third party. You get to bridge the gaps between two organizations within your client. If this group is not talking to this group, you get to be the communication channel. So you kind of force people to work together that normally wouldn't work together, or you get to draw out information that Team A would never get to Team B, but they'll give it to you. So you really get to bridge gaps that normally will not bridge themselves otherwise. So it's kind of fun. You get to meld the company together a little bit closer.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
All right.
So let me ask you a question. I think a typical supply chain question is, how do you improve a process? Have anybody of you faced this question in an interview? Like, this is a very important question, I think, asked across supply chain interviews. How do you approach this question? Any input?
Repeat the question.
That's a great way to approach it, yes.
It's like, how do you improve a process? Let's say you're in charge of a process. How do you improve it?
Like you said, I'd ask what the process is, what context we're talking about, what specifics within the process you want to improve, maybe. I need a little bit more.
Yeah, so that's a great start, but then what after that?
I think the first step would be to measure. So you need to understand quantitatively what is the problem. From there, you could dig in and do some root causes, understand what is it, and then implement a solution. And also measure when you see have your solutions you implemented has it improved the way you expect it to improve, and if not, then just continue the cycle.
I think since we were speaking very generically, we didn't give you a lot of context. That's a great answer. A good default for any supply chain question is to measure, implement, and measure. It's, measuring is the name of the game in supply chain.
Did you call that one of growing possible implications of whatever you do as well?
Yeah.
Sure.
The only thing which I would add is that a typical supply chain process improvement exercise is breaking the process into various different steps and then kind of watching each different step and finding out where is the problem. So when you identify the problem, you kind of watch, like literally I had this like experience to watch it. Like there are a team of 7 different people who are watching the process from different angles. And they're kind of recording every movement. Let's say you're doing a packaging process. They're recording every movement. Okay, this guy needs to move so much to get something. Can we make it easier? So the only thing I would add is like I'll break down the whole process into many different steps and watch one by one and figure out where is it that the improvement can happen. Does it make sense?
I would also let someone to like kind of break it down into 3 to 5 groups using the McCord approach. I don't know if you guys know about that.
McKinsey approach.
Do you guys, I mean, have they asked you guys any of that before?
They didn't ask us any, at least for me, they didn't ask me any very like consulting specific questions because I don't actually honestly know if their expectation is for us to know that stuff going into it. But that's like VC, as an example, is something you definitely learn a lot about once you get there.
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah.
But going into it, I was never, I don't know about Jeff or JJ, but I was never asked about anything that consulting specific.
I'd never heard the term until like the first week.
Just so you know, it means mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. So make sure you're covering everything, but you're not overlapping and being redundant. So just so you know what that means.
Right. It's never helped very well.
Yeah.
I have a question. What are top 3 skills for a supply chain consultant? I just Googled it.
Consultant in particular or any supply chain professional?
Let's say supply chain professional. You know, these guys can answer from consulting view, you as an operation manager.
Well, since I've been like going third every time I'm like defaulting, the first thing that came to mind is being able to truly listen to what it is that they want you to do. So being able to listen and keep asking the right questions, so you keep breaking down the walls of what are they really getting at. Because they'll say, oh, we'll want to improve this process. You need to know why do you want to improve that process. Because you don't know why, then you're going to approach it from the wrong angle. So keep asking why and keep listening to what their true root cause is. I would say is very, very valuable as consultants or any problem-solving situation is keep asking why to know the main reason. And at the end of the day, you also have to know how to start cranking through numbers. I had to learn a lot this summer. So there's no way of getting around being able to start quantifying changes that need to be implemented. So those are the first 2 that come to mind.
That was the one I was going to throw in at the end was you need to be comfortable working with numbers, and they'll test that throughout consulting interviews especially. And supply chain in general, so much of it is quantitative and measuring performance, so that's a really important skill to have.
Yeah, I mean, JJ touched on one of them, I would say, but the 3 I would say are communication, collaboration, which there is a difference, and then analytical skills at a very high level.
Yeah, pretty much. I think the leadership, along with analytical skills, if you are working in a company where there is a large team you have to manage, then getting a buy-in from your associates or buy-in from your senior leaders comes really important, because as a manager you can come up with a lot of different good changes, come up with a technology, but nobody's going to use it if you cannot really get that message across. So from that perspective, it is very important that you can communicate your message really well. You can motivate people to really adopt to new things, and that is an art. Really get people to experiment with new things. So I think that is really important when you're working in a different kind of industry. I think it's more of industry specific too.
Sorry, another thing that I was just thinking of some of our group projects that we've been working on this year. In the end, a lot of the questions our professors ask us is, well, what is, tell me X. Well, X doesn't really mean anything because it's just a number. It's not an actionable plan. So I think part of communicating, part of telling them, getting the buy-in is give them an actionable result, not just a number, because a number doesn't really truly mean anything for the organization. So again, always turn your ideas into how they can actually do something with that.
It's a very good question.
For behavioral questions, what do you think is the difference between a pretty good answer and an outstanding answer?
I'm gonna say brevity.
Probably part of it. Brevity, and I think this sounds so simple because you'd almost think I'm describing the difference between a really bad answer and a good answer. But so many times people give answers that sound really good, but if you really sit back and reflect on what they said, they didn't answer the question at all. And as obvious as this sounds, make sure you're truly answering the question that they ask you. A lot of the times when I'm asked a question, an idea pops into my head, and you know, the heat of the moment, I start running with that idea, and next thing you know, I'm going down a path that's not even going towards the answer that they want to hear about. So being able to truly digest and understand what it is they want to hear, what skills they want to see a display of, and making sure the examples you give are illustrating those skills, and to do it with brevity.
I think I just want to add to this. I think one of the frameworks, STAR format, which you guys have all heard probably, I think it has really helped me to think about how to answer the question. An outstanding answer probably has component from each different part. I have heard a lot of time people talking about, I led a team of 20 people and we saved $70 million. But tell me how you did that, you know? Like, it's fine that you saved $70 million, but a lot of times we miss telling, we kind of skip telling what was the exact thing which I did. I think they're really interested to know how you thought about the situation and what you exactly did in that situation to get to that impact. So sometimes we kind of miss a couple of elements, so that can kind of create a difference between a good answer and an outstanding answer.
You mentioned STAR. I don't know if everybody knows what it means. When I went to Purdue in the Midwest, we used PAR. It's problem, action, results. I mean, I'm just saying it could be some different analogies. I'm not familiar with STAR.
No, well, same concept, situation, task, action, result. I think you bring up a good point though, in that they're really big on hammering you guys with star. And sometimes that doesn't come very naturally to people. And so I wouldn't limit yourselves to answering in that star format if you feel like it's turning you into a mechanized robot. I mean, you need to still be a human being. That's what they want to see. That's what they're trying to get to know. And so if you have it in a format that you're comfortable with, that you feel still can adequately illustrate whatever it is they're looking for, then don't feel like you have to default to the star, to the PAR. Figure out what system works best for you, as long as that system is in fact serving the purpose and illustrating your skills effectively.
But that definitely helps you to kind of think about the situation.
It does. It's a good way to break it down.
At least for the preparation perspective, it really helps you to kind of think really deep into the situation and come up with all different aspects of what you did in your past experience.
And I know a lot of companies go, like when they're evaluating you on those sheets back there, they have like star written out.
Yeah.
And so they look for that sort of stuff. Like I know Boeing, Amazon, and a few others will look for that format too. So it kind of helps frame your thoughts a little bit.
I have a question about, okay. Would you please tell me the reasons that made you choose to apply to the supply chain position? For you guys consulting again and for you operation.
Say that again, please.
What were the reasons behind the fact that you chose to apply for supply chain position? Position. Yep.
Do you want to go first? Do you want to do that?
I've always been drawn to supply chain. I didn't realize that that's what it was throughout my life. But as someone that I respect very much, his philosophy was, if it's not broken, make it better. And that is a very, very different concept than what the rest of the world often tells you. And all the frustrations in my life is when people don't make something better. So supply chain is the process of taking something that's working and systematically studying it and making it step by step by step better. And the idea of doing that is very empowering. I'm not shooting in the dark. I'm not just throwing my darts wherever I want to. I'm actually looking systematically at something very specific. And I think too often we we go with random ideas and not to the actual numbers and actionable changes. So not very good answers, not very short, but that's what drew me in, is constant improvement.
I guess I can answer more in the context specific to consulting. And what draws me to consulting is how dynamic it is. I get very bored if I'm not constantly being challenged, and that's the nature of consulting, is you're constantly being given new challenges. And even if a new challenge looks the same as an old challenge on the surface, when you put it in the context of a different client, it's always new and it's always different. And it always really keeps you on your toes. So for me, consulting is just a way to stay engaged and to really, I guess, find passion in what I'm doing, because I like that constant change that comes with consulting.
I think for me it's a very specific answer. I can talk about that in my previous experience before MBA. I did supply chain, ran a retail store. So a lot of thing was operation, dealing with customers, dealing with suppliers, getting stuff. So for me it became, this whole area came out of an interest for that. So I didn't really have to think hard about choosing supply chain. It was more like I was kind of drawn into it. So that was the reason I came to a good supply chain school, and that is the reason I'm applying to this role. So I think I can kind of connect the dots there.
So key from that one though, they're going to ask you that question. Have something in mind that connects well with why you are. Like, think about this. Like, I'm sure you're all here for a reason. Like, why are you here? You can be honest, and they want to see your personality and know the truth behind your logic. So be truthful and just give them that.
This is in terms of hopefully getting a job. Have you guys done like market research on what the typical compensations are for those positions upon graduation, and were the positions that you guys offered, did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, I definitely, I use Glassdoor a lot. So, I mean, it's a quick, easy go-to that most people have probably heard of, if not, Glassdoor.com. But that's what I use a lot, just to kind of gauge the level of type of position maybe that I'm being offered, and what I think that position should be making versus what the offer has.
Yeah, I think pretty much. And you can probably go back to Career Center. They have some data. They can kind of also help you to see.
Yeah, that's a good point. They have aggregate data.
I was kind of wondering about, you know, some of the other schools, maybe Harvard, for instance, and positions that were offered there versus here. You know, if there's a gap, you know, if there is.
At least for Amazon, I can tell you, this summer there were like 60 people from Harvard, MIT, everything. We were all treated equally. We were all paid equally. So I think a lot of companies now, for the same position, they don't have a discrimination.
You got a better ROI.
Right? Yeah, much better. I think the only fair comparison